Hello, everyone, and welcome to AWS Made Easy Ask Us Anything live stream. And this is episode number 12. And joining you today is me, Stephen Barr, and co-host Rahul Subramaniam. How are
Hey
you doing?
everyone, doing very well. Had an amazing weekend.
What made it so good?
It feels like we kind of are regaining our social life of sorts. So this Friday evening, a very dear friends of ours who have kids exactly the same age as ours, we decided that we would try catching up after we put the kids to bed. And it was just so amazing. We stayed up till 1 a.m. just chatting. It was really, really awesome. So awesome that we decided to do it again on Saturday. So yeah, it feels like, and I can't remember the last time we did something like this. So yeah, that and a bunch of interesting 3D printing, home assistant setup. I set up Octoprint for my 3D printer. So yeah, a bunch of interesting things I got to do all through the weekend.
I want to ask about the 3D printing, but I'm still in shock about just, as a parent of four, having an evening where everything lines up, the kids are in bed, and you get to have some. I remember a long time ago when my first two kids were a bit smaller, and I was spending some time with some friends who didn't have kids, and they were fussing over the restaurant to go to and all these little mundane things. Like, don't you get it? We can just sit here and talk.
Correct.
It's incredible. We can do whatever we want.
That's exactly what we did. I mean, and the probability that 2 nights in a row line up that way has been impossible till this far. So it's one of these big game-changing events.
Well, that's a big congratulations and a slight amount of jealousy to you.
You'll get there soon enough. Cool. And yeah, the next time we are in the same city, the kids do get along really well and have a great time together. So we should definitely do that as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Combine resources.
Absolutely. How was your weekend?
Oh, really, really well. So I'll show you. I'll do a little visual. We went to this place. Oops, I'll show you. We went to this place that's somewhat hard to pronounce. Take a guess at how you'd pronounce the city here. Sequim.
Sequim.
It's pronounced Squim.
Squim. Okay.
Squim. And it's they have this really cool thing over there. They have this the lavender festival. Because they farm lavender out there. This isn't my photo, but I just grabbed it off of Instagram. But the fun thing is that to get there, one of the ways to get there, you take a ferry. So you go to downtown Seattle, and you can go over to Bainbridge and then drive over. And so on the way out, I took this little video, and I posted it on Twitter. Just, Seattle, what a great place to live. It got 10,000 views, 271 likes. The impressions it's the best tweet I've ever had. But I think part of why is because half of the readers thought it was sarcastic, in that if you look at it, it's a cloudy day, and they said, hey, you're actually going away from Seattle. So if it's so great, why are you leaving? But then the people who've taken this ferry, they know, okay, going for the day. So for the record, I like Seattle, and this was a great day trip made possible by my proximity to Seattle.
We have to draw some learnings from this.
Oh, absolutely.
AWS Made Easy, podcast. We need to figure out a way to be sarcastic about, or sound sarcastic at least, about what we are saying.
Well, there's
everything should move to the cloud.
Well, there's this great thing called, what is it, Poe's Law, where it says if on the internet, if there gets to a point where you can't tell the difference between extremism and satire. Yeah. So that's, I think, that the sweet spot that you want to hit. And then the last funny story for that weekend. So my Australian wife ran into a cafe to get some. Well, what she intended to get was French fries for the kids. It was the end of a long day, a plate of hot French fries, and so she goes in and asks for a bag of hot chips. And not kidding, she got a Ziploc bag of potato chips that had been put into the microwave. And someone with a straight face handed this to her. It was great. So she's still a few more adaptations to be back in Seattle.
That is a really, really funny story.
All right. Well, shall we talk about our first one today? We've got some exciting announcements. Let's jump into it with verified provider. All right.
Yeah.
So I'll show the transition, and here we go. All right. So Amazon EC2 console adds verified provider label for public AMIs. So the idea is anyone can put anything on the marketplace, and to be able to have, well, I guess what comes up with any repository of code that you might use. Unfortunately, part of human nature is that someone might put something in there that's malicious. So what does verified provider look like? Basically this. So if you look at, well, hopefully the Amazon Linux is verified. But then we got Mac OS is verified. This is the front page. Red Hat's verified. So the idea is that if you see some AMI that you've heard about, like say you're copying an AMI ID from a tutorial, how do you know that that AMI doesn't have some rogue bit of code in it that you don't want to be using? Well, you can look at this. You can look for the verified provider stamp. So, Rahul, what are your thoughts on this one?
So, I think the intention is exactly what you just stated, which is to make sure that there isn't rogue stuff in there. I think here Amazon kind of fell a little short. If you look at buying stuff on Amazon.com, they actually have reviews and stuff for that particular item, not just the vendor. And I think that's what is missing over here. You can have a certified vendor, but it says nothing really about the content that they have actually put out. So, for example, if there's an AMI that somebody created, let's say Red Hat created or someone else created, there's nothing to say that that particular AMI does not have old libraries or security vulnerabilities that I don't know of. So, I think there are two things that are kind of really important. One is the verification has to happen at the AMI level, not just at the vendor level. And the second one is that there has to be an expiry to that verification, right? Because there are always new security vulnerabilities that are coming up. There are always new, threats that show up against old systems that, for that particular point in time, they were all valid. But new insights from new threats could invalidate an existing AMI in particular. It doesn't invalidate the vendor. The vendor is still a good vendor. But what you care really about is that specific AMI. And so I don't think it's really helped that much.
That's a really good point. And I can see the benefit of, like you said, verifying the vendor is one level, but then beyond the vendor, it's kind of an all or nothing. Do you trust every last piece of code that Red Hat's ever put out ever, and even from 5 years ago, to still be up with security or not?
Yeah.
So the quality is basically point in time.
Correct. And the quality is point in time. And that quality, the value of that quality changes over a period of time. And if you just certify the vendor, someone might be fooled into thinking that they're actually picking the right AMI, which is, from their perspective, certified by AWS, but it really isn't. It's only the vendor that is verified by AWS, and it says nothing really about the AMI content. So, I'm a little disappointed in this one because it's kind of a half-baked process for them.
Okay, so our takeaway from this one is, all right, you want to add in reviews and things like, is the security still valid, right? Imagine a lamp stack from 10 years ago must have all sorts of unpatched vulnerabilities that have since been patched, but the AMI by design is frozen in time.
Correct. I mean, in my ideal world, this marketplace would look very much like the Amazon.com marketplace, where you have the characteristics of the AMI. It tells you, the bill of materials in it. It, just like you have the specifications on any object or the thing that you buy on Amazon.com. And then it has reviews. Let people comment about what they found hard or easy, or what is missing in there, or how to patch it up, or like whatever instructions, because reading those reviews really do help. Have the FAQ section like you have for the stuff that you sell on Amazon.com. Like, I think bringing that concept of the marketplace, because their experience over there with that selling is actually very similar to what you need over here. There's just such a massive selection right now of these AMIs. Nobody knows what the right one to pick is. So just by saying, here's a vendor who's validated, says nothing about what you're actually picking.
And especially like if you're just getting started, I can imagine, as I've been in this position, you're reading a tutorial. The tutorial might be a little bit dated, and part of that dated tutorial might reference an AMI that was great at the time, but has since been superseded. I mean, it's not going to vanish from the marketplace. It will just, and if it has that vendor certified sticker, we might even get a false sense of security.
Exactly. And I think that's a dangerous thing for customers to think that they are secure in picking a vendor verified AMI. I think would be a really dangerous thing potentially.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Well, in that case, what's our final verdict on this announcement?
Okay. So last week we basically decided that on every announcement that we discuss on this show, we are going to either decide it complicates life or it simplifies it. And I think in this case, given that it falls short of what it's really trying to do, and it gives people a sense of false security, I would say it just complicates things. So I don't know if I'd say too complicated, but it just complicates things over here.
All right,
so
this is a beta a beta of our rating system. All right, so we'll say complicate things. All right. So okay. So our verdict is it's complicated because it could lead to a false sense of security, because whether an AMI is good or not is really a question of at a point in time, and it could totally depend on your situation. It could be great for research, but don't ever make it public facing.
Correct.
Right? So
yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, I think we've got some breaking news we want to share. Let's do a quick transition and get into our breaking news. All right. So this announcement is 35 minutes old?
Yeah, it's about 35, 40 minutes old. I think it just came in as we were prepping to get online.
I'll put the URL of the announcement in the comment section so everyone can follow along. Here we go. Okay, so Wicker. I'm not even what is Wicker?
So it's actually rare for them to come up with something completely new and different, which is not either in reInvent or they haven't done a big show about it. But it looks like if you actually go to the AWS Wicker webpage, just go down at the end of that. Yeah. This, I think, gives you a much better idea of what Wicker really is. So basically for your corporate communication, if the need for security, end-to-end encryption, making sure that all of your communications are archived for legal and compliance purposes, this tries to solve that particular pattern. So you basically have client, controlled keys that basically encrypt everything, where even AWS has no control over or no access to decrypt any of this stuff. And all of your data compliance requirements are kind of managed in one place. And it basically encrypts and allows for communication. What I'm interested in knowing is if it's a new client like Chime or if it is embedded and built into Chime. I haven't been able to figure that out yet. So I think we're going to get the preview.
I'm looking for a screenshot. Let's see.
There is one.
Who is Wicker? Like, is this a Slack replacement? Like you said, a Chime replacement, or what is it? A video.
I have a feeling that this is going to be a layer in Chime because it makes sense over there, because you're talking about chats, you're talking about communicate, voice, video, you're talking about file sharing and screen sharing, which is all. I mean, AWS's tool there is Chime and the Chime SDK. And I'm assuming that Wicker is going to be not only an independent service where you could have any streaming data or file data that gets encrypted, but Chime will probably incorporate this as the client of choice. But I don't know how this plays with Slack or any of the other tools. Again, since this is just 30 minutes old, we're going to, right after this call, I'm going to see if I can get preview access to Wicker and play around with it. We'll probably have an update next week on this.
Yeah, that sounds really good. It's reading the description, it looks like Slack, and I can see a benefit of, as from a procurement side, when you're looking at a tool, especially having worked with PHI and financial data, you kind of vet each tool and said, is this tool approved for this type of data or not? And then you have to be really careful when you cross those boundaries, even just sending your colleague a message like, hey, what's going on with patient ABC123? That could be potentially a violation. Like, you can't send that in a Slack message. So if this is on AWS, you've already vetted AWS, you've vetted the whole thing in terms of encrypted in transit, encrypted at rest. That could be really useful in having to bring in extra tools.
Correct. Though, I mean, with third-party tools, I really don't know how this would work, because if there are third-party tools that are end-to-end encrypted, then you need to figure out a way to kind of get access to all of that data for your corporate compliance and pull it all out.
I guess I was meaning replacing third-party tools with thinking of Amazon as mostly, if you already consider that first party, then.
No, I'm fine if everything is in the AWS ecosystem, because everything would just plug right in. But if you were a corporation using something like Slack or Jive or one of these products that are used internally for communication, or Skype for that matter, how do you get that data into the system for your compliance? And how do you then layer in Wicker? That's what I'm most curious about. So it's pretty clear on the on Active Directory, SSO, all of those sign-ins and stuff like that. I'm just very curious about how the end-to-end encryption happens, and how do you then take the data and still preserve it and store it for compliance.
Okay, and here it's saying you can create and manage Wicker networks and also Wicker bots. We definitely have to have a good play with this and see what it's doing, exactly where it fits in, what it replaces or aims to replace, what its relationship with Chime is. Yeah. But overall, it looks like it could be possibly really exciting.
Could potentially be exciting, but honestly, I have never seen a more vague product announcement than this, where you're still trying to guess at what the product actually does. I was trying to Google for any video, any description by anybody about Wicker, and it's literally just this announcement.
We see a kind of a screenshot in here. You see that it's there's a window where
I don't know if it's a stock photo or a screenshot. So
I think this is
but you can download Wicker on the Wicker page. Might be an interesting exercise to just try that. If you just go up, there's a download Wicker. So you can download it for Mac. I think it's a new client, looks like. It seems about as big as the Chime client. I assume that they just packaged Chime into it.
137 megabytes. Well, here we go. Applications.
We'll probably need to screen share.
Yeah, I'll share that over in a moment. Let's see. Wicker Pro. Okay. Let's do share. Where's the window? Okay. I'm just trying to find the doc says it's launched a window, but I can't find it. All right, let's try that one more time. Here we go. Let me share this window now. Go to share. Let's see. Window. Okay, this is what happens when you download Wicker.
Looks like a completely different UI compared to Chime. And you just enter your email ID?
Well,
or hide your email ID and just sign in?
All right, 1 second here.
Let's try that out. I'd love to see what it looks like. The fun of live streaming a live analysis of a new product.
Now I have to check my email and enter a code. 1 second. I definitely don't have my email on screen. Verify my account. Open Wicker Pro. Okay, now I'll put you back on screen. Okay, all right, 1 second.
I think one of the big opportunities is to simplify how you get communication done.
I'm going to skip this.
By the way, did you do Wicker Me or Wicker Pro?
I did Wicker Pro. I put the window back on. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Welcome
that
to
looks
Wicker.
like Chime on the left. That looks like a redone Chime UI.
Let's see.
Okay, so you have rooms, pretty much like Chime.
Pinning search. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll have to invite you later and see what this is like.
Yeah.
See if this is it a Slack replacement, or like I said, is it a layer over Chime?
At first look, it literally looks like Chime. It looks like a reskinned Chime to me. But let's play around with it through the week, and we will get back to all of you on with what we think about it.
So can we give this a simplified or complicated rating yet? I don't know if we can.
I don't think we can yet till we understand exactly what it does. So let's reserve judgment on this one till next week, and we'll bring it back next week. So while we are on this subject, let me just talk about what I have, and I really hope that this is nothing like Chime. The thing that I hate about Chime is that it feels like an external product that's kind of, somehow hammered into the AWS console with a very, very shoddy integration. So for example, in Chime, if you have to provision a user, you have to go into your AWS console, go into the Chime app, and then provision folks over there. And then there's a separate set of credentials to log into Chime, which is not your AWS console credentials. It's not it's not those identities or keys. It's something completely different.
That's almost how Amplify console felt at first.
Yes.
When it's like, wait, this is a separate system.
Correct. And unfortunately, Chime is still that way. Chime doesn't feel integrated at all into the AWS ecosystem. So I really hope that they've not made the same mistakes with this. So that's going to be my hope. I'm going to try this out. In fact, I've already downloaded the client. We'll see how easy or difficult this becomes.
Well, send me a Wicker message. I wonder if that's going to be a new verb. Can you Wicker me? I know. Say, hey, Slack me. All right. Can you Wicker me and see what happens?
Skype me. Wicker me. I think someday there's going to be a word that's just going to sound awful in a sentence.
Oh, yeah.
And as a verb.
All right. Well, we're going to put a question mark on this one for now, and let's have a quick break. And we come back. I think we've got another breaking announcement.
Yeah.
Public cloud costs going up and your AWS bill growing without the right cost controls? Cloudfix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by focusing on AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe with zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. The best part? With your approval, Cloudfix finds and implements AWS fixes to help you run more efficiently. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right. The announcement is Amazon Macy introduces new capability to securely review and validate sensitive data found in an S3 object. So I put the URL of the article into the comments, so for anyone who wants to follow along. And this one's also brand new. This one just came out, about an hour ago?
Yep. Yeah, so AWS Macy is actually a really neat service with a bunch of different tools that identify things like PII, PHI, and so on in your data. And this is a very, very fundamental problem for anyone that is bringing in data into their systems. Making sure that it is scraped of all of this data upfront is something that you want to do. And tools are, few and far between, especially tools that work well are few and far between. But Macy has been remarkably good at doing these kinds of detections and fixing your problem. And it can be it can be part of your data ingestion workflow itself, and it just comes in it kind of operates really smoothly. Once you have stuff in S3, you can basically have the S3 event trigger, a job to go figure out whether there's anything that is non-compliant, and then you can automatically, pull in a glue job if you need to clean stuff up. So really, really useful tool, and looks like they've got a bunch of new checks or reviews that you can validate.
So even what it says, credential materials. So is this what powers, say, if you check in a key to a public-facing repo or a key where it shouldn't be?
I think so. I think that's exactly what they're trying to do with the GitHub stuff. But here, if you've checked in a bunch of stuff where something is tagged, like a key value pair is tagged with the password somewhere, and you see free text, then this would end up flagging it, which is pretty neat. So you want to make sure that in whatever you're dumping into S3, you don't have, clear text passwords and stuff like that stored. So incredibly valuable.
Do we know what the pricing is? Let's see the pricing. US East, 10 cents per bucket.
Correct.
50,000 gigabytes at $1 per gigabyte. So, wow.
This is cheap depending on how much data you're pulling in. To make sure that you don't have PII, PHI, like the liabilities associated with pulling those in and potentially not handling the right way are severe. So just having this one simple check in place, I think, makes a big difference.
I think back when I was in healthcare IT, I think the internal number we had going around was like $1 million per patient record. So think, this CSV file is worth $300 million. It's a bit, and plus HIPAA means you expose yourself to personal criminal liability for doing the wrong thing. Correct. So yeah, this is a lot cheaper. This is very, very, very cheap. We wouldn't hesitate for a second to run this on anything that could possibly have personal or anything sensitive in it.
Yeah. By the way, I also saw GDPR in there. I am no GDPR expert or specialist. So if anyone in the audience is, please feel free to comment and enlighten us. But in whatever little experience I have had dealing with GDPR, I find that it is an interpretation depending on the the country or the region or wherever it's applicable. And it's also a function of the kind of data you have. So I'd be curious to see what specific checks come out of the box or are available out of the box for GDPR.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that too. And I think for some of I know that some of the regulations involve, if you pull your data, what happens to a machine learning model that was trained on that data? And that's a bit more fuzzy because do you retrain existing models that are deployed? And I think that some people do. And I think to be compliant, you might need to. But at least being able to identify any plain text blob that has a name, an address, a credit card, a password. Let's see, they have a link to sensitive data, manage data identifiers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could we zoom in a little bit over here?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So look for JSON web tokens, PuTTY private keys, bank account number. This is cool.
Yeah. So we've used a bunch of Macy stuff for a bunch of customer data that we pull in. So we've been using Macy quite extensively, but do they say which ones are new? So credit card stuff has been there for a while. I think the JSON tokens I hadn't seen earlier. HIPAA compliant stuff might also be new. Interesting.
It's funny with JSON tokens, how you tend to memorize what a opening curly bracket looks like in base 64 of lowercase e, lowercase y, capital J. Like, okay, I know what this is.
Very true. So, yeah, I mean, this is the easiest way to kind of filter out all of the potential dangerous PII, PHI, HIPAA kind of and GDPR data. So I would give it the stamp of it simplifies life. For sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to build a system that does this from scratch.
And to get the amount of training data to build this from scratch would be really hard.
Yeah,
and actually, even handling that training data would be difficult in and of itself because you need all that personal information to train it.
You're absolutely right. I think just data would be so scarce that we'd never build a decent system if we were to do it ourselves. So the fact that this is available as a super cheap service in the context of what not having it means, this absolutely falls in the simplifies bucket.
All right. Well, anything else we should talk about before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, I just realized as I was looking at the comments that he posted, we are on YouTube. So last week we talked about getting onto YouTube as well. So now we've moved on to 5 channels.
Yep, we are on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Awesome. So we got one more channel in, and hopefully we can get someone from StreamYard, coming in and talking about how they do all of this amazing stuff. Looking forward to that episode.
Absolutely. We'll get that lined up and calendared. All right, we're going to switch gears to AI. Okay, so this is a little bit of a different one. They announced the AI Use Case Explorer. Let me share the screen here. Oops.
And I'm going to...
There we go.
I wish we had a banner that said, finally. You've heard me rant about AWS not being opinionated about anything. And for the first time, I'm seeing it. There you go. For the first time, I'm seeing AWS actually put out a tool that helps you with making decisions. I'd asked them to create a simple decision tree for how you choose the right data source or a data store. The distinction between Aurora and just RDS and Neptune and DynamoDB and DocumentDB and all the others. They just refused to do it. Like they They refuse to have a simple decision tree that would help people decide which kind of data store is right for them, for their use case. But I'm really glad that the AI team thinks differently within AWS. Again, benefits of the federated setup that they have. So I'm really glad they built this tool, because this is a real challenge. Finding the right models for the right industries, for the right outcomes, with the right trade-offs being made available is incredibly hard. And it is the main reason why everyone goes about building their own architectures, their own neural networks, their own models from scratch every single time. If they could search through it, filter through it, and figure out which models are most relevant for their use cases, they can get a really, really neat starting platform without having to go through an entire, machine learning workflow definition and execution, which can take months at times. And plus, without all the data, you may not even be able to get that kind of accuracy. We were just talking about Macy, right? If you wanted to build something like that, you just wouldn't know where to go look for something like this. And the fact that this is now available in the Explorer really tells you, okay, I know exactly how to go leverage this particular model or this particular service to deliver these outcomes.
Well, let's have a look at it. So they say it's interesting that you can drill down into use cases. Okay, let's say we want consumer goods, and we want, let's do marketing, and we want more revenue. Sounds good. Okay, so then we get personalization.
AWS Personalize is an amazing service, which we've talked about before. In fact, our very first episode was with the GM of AWS Personalize, Ankur Mehrotra. And he was talking about how everyone should be able to leverage this right out of the box with really, really simple pieces of data.
Well, and I think what's really neat about this is that, we think we're always focused on the tech part of it, but then you zoom out from that in terms of what does an organization need to launch a new AI project, especially an organization that hasn't done one before. And you want to know, okay, what have similar organizations done in the past? What's possible?
Yeah.
And to be able to right away say, okay, here's some things, here's other companies, here's success stories. Oh, interesting. I didn't know it would take you to YouTube. Okay, cool. So here's all of the things that you need to make your case as to why you could want to do this. And here's how the path has been trod before. That's really, really neat. Because sometimes, AI especially, it can sound like a very daunting thing. I always think about Terminators and robots and all this stuff. And it can be a bit unnerving to say, okay, we want to roll out AI into your business. And so to be able to have all these use cases at your fingertips that are similar to what you want to do, that can be really empowering as a business.
To be very honest, deploying an entire workflow for, bringing the data, cleaning the data, doing feature engineering, then training the model based on it. Once you figure out the model, deploy the model for inferencing, and then keeping the inference service up is nothing short of that nightmare you were talking about with AI, the Terminator kind of nightmare. This comes close. It's torturous. Working through all those notebooks and those experiments and figuring out what is the right model for you. That's all extremely painful work. So the fact that you can actually leverage other people's use cases, other people's work and services from AWS is a big, big win for sure. By the way, I'm very curious. I saw one category called cost optimization. So can we go, let's look at the filters again. Let's search.
Okay.
I think is software one of the categories. Yep, okay. Great. Let's look at operations, software operations, and then let's look at cost savings.
Reduce
costs. Let's see. So fraud detection, great. Yes, operationally, you want to be able to detect anomalies. And they have some really neat anomaly detection tools. So look out for metrics, look out for vision, look out for metrics in particular, helps with fraud. Chatbots and virtual assistants. Yep. All of your Lex, Poly, comprehend, recognition, things that, comprehend recognition can do for you for not safe for work and those kind of things. They're all operationally hard things to get right. And you can just start leveraging a bunch of these services to do that effectively right out of the box. What are the other options at the bottom?
Contact center intelligence, cybersecurity.
Yeah. Cybersecurity. So they have Security Hub now, which is pretty awesome. Bunch of process automation. This is probably change manager as well as actually I'm interesting. What is in process automation?
So it's automate data processing from documents.
Oh, this is Kendra.
Well, it's oh yeah, look at this is text track,
Kendra. Yep.
Comprehend, augmented AI. This is really neat. I can see this really bridging the gap between, what we think of when you think of the AWS consoles, it's this giant menu, and you feel like, all right, well, I guess I better hope I picked the right thing. And then this, which is very opinionated and very directed and curated into telling you where to go and what services to use. It's a real break from the typical approach.
Right. And very pleasantly out of character for AWS to do something like this. So again, this gets a big thumbs up from me. It simplifies customers' lives dramatically. So yeah, definitely a big thumbs up. And I wish they had more of this across the different product or service categories.
So something like this for what database to use?
Yeah. Or cool. Yeah, I mean, wouldn't that be super neat?
Absolutely.
Like just NoSQL databases. What should I use? Should I use MongoDB hosted on AWS, which again is a big collaboration and a service from AWS? Or should you use DynamoDB or should you use DocumentDB? When do you use which? Like, no, there's no opinion from AWS.
And then should you use DynamoDB with single table design, or should you use a couple of tables?
Yeah,
I was scratching my head on this yesterday, trying to figure out how to keep track of the articles. And Alex Debris, you sold another copy of the DynamoDB book. All right. So,
absolutely.
Okay. Well, yeah, again, this gets a big simplifies from us. This is really great. Anything else we should add to this one?
No, I think we covered this one. Yeah, I think we covered all aspects of it.
All right, well, let's have a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about CodeBuild.
Is your AWS bill going up? Cloudfix makes AWS cost savings easy and helps you with your cloud hygiene. Think of Cloudfix as the Norton Utilities for AWS. AWS recommends hundreds of new fixes each year to help you run more efficiently and save money. But it's difficult to track all these recommendations and tedious to implement them. Stay on top of AWS recommended savings opportunities and continuously save 25% off your AWS bill. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
Okay, AWS CodeBuild supports ARM-based workloads in South America, Sao Paulo, and Europe, Stockholm. Just put the link in the chat. So on the whole, it looks like this is only two of their many regions, but I guess the broader theme of this is more ARM support, more Graviton.
Correct. So I think there's a need to bring more and more workloads to support ARM. And there is still a little bit of a gap. I think development environments not being ARM-based or not being specifically Graviton is a challenge for sure. You want to make sure that stuff that works locally on your machine works when you deploy it. And that's why I think we need a paradigm shift on that front of it, on the development side. And then on the the CI/CD side of things, which is kind of what CodeBuild does, helps you, build up all your stuff, create the artifacts, put them into repositories, and then leverage it for deployments. The fact that those are now available on ARM more widely, they did announce, US East one, if I remember correctly, 6 months ago or so. So now that it's available more widely, I hope that there's going to be more adoption. But there are still large parts of the developer workflow that are still not covered by support for ARM. So, I'd encourage the audience to take a look at tools like DevSpaces, which allow you to do this on ARM.
Just going to mention that it's I've got it into my habit now. I'll take a repository, open it up in the standard x86 dev space, use it, make sure it's all set, and then just change the URL to our Graviton dev space. And most of the time it works. Occasionally you have to point to a different package name if those haven't been merged. Because what happens is ideally package names are built for multi-architecture, but sometimes when it gets started, it's like -arm or something. And eventually that gets all merged up. But usually it basically works. But getting that workflow there is, I'm glad that the tooling is moving towards a more ARM-oriented world.
I would agree. And I think it needs to. It needs to move really, really fast. I don't know whether you saw that announcement, but AWS is already at a run rate of ARM constituting about $5 billion a year in revenue, which is a big deal. I mean, given how recent ARM is, and we've barely scratched the surface in terms of adoption. The fact that ARM contributes to an annual run rate of roughly 5 billion at this point is quite a significant achievement. So it looks like it's gaining tons of traction. More and more people are kind of moving on to it, even though there's still a lot of folks who've not even considered it or moved to it. But this is the bet you want to make. Graviton is the bet you want to make. And so if you're not already leveraging these tools that allow you to manage your entire end-to-end workflow on ARM, then at some point of time, it's going to prevent you from leveraging the cost-benefit analysis that the Graviton, or cost benefits that the Graviton brings to you. What did we discuss the last time, if I remember correctly? The Graviton processors are producing anywhere from 35 to 50% price performance improvement over the x86, depending on which Graviton processor and type you're on. But I think the C7Gs were 50. We were showing a bunch of cases with 55% price performance improvement.
Yeah, and that's over the Graviton 2, right? Not over the x86.
I think it was 40% over Graviton 2, and in total about 50 odd percent or near 60 over the x86s. So yeah, and this is not the end of it, right? They're constantly coming up with new versions of the Graviton, and there's tons more performance to be gained out of it.
And like you said, it's really cool that this ecosystem is filling out very quickly. And I was thinking back to just a couple of years ago, I was trying to get CI/CD working for ARM, and it was a real pain. So I was using GitHub, and GitHub runners didn't support ARM. So I had a NVIDIA Jetson on my desk running a self-hosted runner. Yeah. And it was a bit fragile of a process. So we know that when AWS brings something in, it's robust, it's tested, and we could count on it. And it doesn't have to be this special case, right? You don't do x86 development on your cloud and then ARM development on a little box on your desk running off of a lab power supply. No, it can be part of your workflow.
Actually, we moved to that. GitHub still has the issue that you don't have ARM-based runners. So for all of our GitHub actions that we run, we've got a cluster of Graviton instances that act as our runners to process all the ARM workloads that we have.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But I wish it was less painful to do that. I just wish it was available out of the box.
Yeah, absolutely. So GitHub, if you're listening, please ARM-based runners would be really welcome. That's where the world's going. So for this announcement, CodeBuild supports ARM. If you happen to be using these two regions, this is a good announcement. But in general, we're very excited about the tooling and development moving to ARM wherever possible. Should we give this a simplifies?
I think we'd give it a simplifies, because the more the tooling gets filled out, the simpler it gets for people. Right now, for anyone who's motivated enough to get the price performance improvements that Graviton has, you have to jump through a whole lot of hoops to make that happen. And every bit of tooling helps, reduce that burden. So definitely a simplifies.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's roll the next article about Amazon Athena. All right, here goes. Okay. Here's the next one. Amazon Athena adds visual query analysis, tuning, and tools. So,
so this is almost like the query planner that you always wanted for Athena. And we are just so used to writing up the queries that make intuitive sense, and then starting to observe the performance of our queries before we can start optimizing them. And we've come to rely on these query analysis engines, to help us fine tune and refine our queries so much, because when you have parameterized queries in particular, you really don't know how people are using it. You don't know how it's affecting the performance of your queries. The fact that these tools are now available makes a big difference to the cycle time of creating these Athena queries and making them available to all the other tools that leverage them, whether it be QuickSight dashboards or any other downstream system like Glue or whatever other job you might be doing. So a huge win for sure.
Yeah, it's really easy to have, if you're not careful, you can wind up with a full node scan popping up. And think, okay, great. Now you've lost all the advantages of your index, and you're just looking at every last entry. And yeah, that slows things down substantially. And being able to spot that visually rather than looking through logs, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Actually, sometimes Athena is fast enough that you don't realize it, but it does massive scans at times, and then it shows up in your bill a month later. And it seems really, really scary when something like that happens. And it's really hard to interpret how a certain SQL is going to be, or I'm using the word interpret twice, but it's really hard to figure out how the database engine is going to, or the Athena query engine is going to interpret the query, the SQL query you write, in terms of how it executes it under the hood. Until you see the query plans, until you see these debugging markers, till you see them, you're not going to be able to figure out what the problem is. You wouldn't know why you got a massive bill. You wouldn't know why your queries are slow, because you just don't understand enough about how the SQL that you wrote is getting interpreted by the engine. So having this data now is incredibly valuable in simplifying and better indexing the data, or better organizing the data so that it gets indexed and queried effectively by Athena.
I think that one of the things that with SQL, where it's both a strength and a weakness, is that you can do something that's phenomenally complicated. You can look at views calling stored procedures and views and views and views stacked on top of each other, and it will just chug through it. And it might be really slow, but it usually finishes and does the right thing. But like you said, it can lead to either a complexity explosion or a cost explosion or a time explosion. A quick story about a company that will remain nameless. I was doing some consulting, and they wanted to know why their Tableau dashboard took so long to render. And they were thinking it was a Tableau problem, but the underlying data query took about 57 seconds, and the Tableau dashboard took about 58 seconds to render. So, okay, it's not in this case, it wasn't Tableau's fault. It was the fact that it was views on views on views on views. And it was, full node scans on top of another. But it's easy to do. It's easy to get to that situation if you're not careful and if you're not in a hurry, right? They say, oh, a minute's fine or 30 seconds is fine.
Yeah.
But when you're paying for it by the query, it's a different situation.
Yeah. And I think in the case of Athena, this actually gets a lot more complicated. Given that Athena can actually operate on a large number of different kinds of data stores, the interpretation of what a SQL means for a different data store might actually be different. So what comes intuitively in your head as you're writing a SQL may be interpreted differently if you are using Athena to talk to Aurora versus Redshift versus S3 versus DynamoDB.
Yeah, so your mental model gets a lot more complicated. Okay, this piece of the data is actually loading in a Parquet file in an S3 bucket or something like that.
Correct. Exactly. And does it change if you're picking up a Parquet file versus, say, just a CSV or a JSON file? Like, how does it deal with all of that complexity? And how does it interpret SQL? So unless you have that query plan, unless you have those query statistics, it's going to be really hard to get to the root cause of either a slow query or excess costs or, any of those kind of symptoms.
And then I see that as part of this, they've got this new query statistics API. I haven't used this. Have you used it yet? Runtime
Not
query
yet.
statistics.
No, I think this might be relatively new.
Yeah, they mentioned that in the article. They said it's new. Yeah, metrics are displayed as an embedded console
to a new
visualization.
query statistics API.
Yeah.
So what all does it tell you? Let's look at some of the stats that it shows us, and let's try to see if these are valuable. So you have runtime statistics, which is execution time, which is great. Input bytes. Input bytes is neat because it. Actually, I'm curious. Is input bytes the number of bytes that you actually had in the query itself? If it is a parameterized query, that could change. Or is it the number of bytes? No, it's probably that. Output bytes is the resultant data set. Query stage plan. This one is your query plan, basically. And it's looks like a list. So that's pretty neat. That's going to be very, very valuable. And then let's look at the rows. So you have inputs and outputs total and how many rows got returned. Great. Then I'm just wondering whether you get numbers per stage.
I was just
unless
thinking
the query
about
stage
that
plan node.
because you
Do they have
want
the
to
definition
know.
for the? Yeah, do they have the definition of the query stage plan node?
Let's see.
On the left-hand side, you might see data types. Yeah, query stage plan type. Yeah, no, it was right there.
Query stage plan node.
Yeah, so remote, just go up.
Children. Stage plans such as name, identifier, subplans, remote sources. That's interesting. So you get the remote sources, like you're saying.
Yeah.
So
it could be a DynamoDB, it could be Redshift, it could be S3, it could be any of those sources.
And it's interesting, even if you don't have an immediate plan of how to use this data, I find that just having a glance at the underlying data, and this is a general thing, it always helps, right? Because then you know if something big changed, right? Like if your rows in is many order of magnitudes bigger than your rows out, then maybe you want to change where you're filtering versus where you're joining versus it's easy to say select everything and then filter at the end, but then you make your database work a lot harder. Maybe you want to filter earlier and get your rows in and rows out a bit closer. There's a lot of things that just can, even if you haven't done the proper analytics, just having a gut feeling of what's right for your particular job, and then it can alert you when something changes. That's good to know.
Correct. And actually, the mental model that you just described, where is it a filter first? Is it a scan of a big chunk of data and then a filter and then picking the data elements that you want? Or is it a filter first and then scan that's happening later? Like that mental model that you have for SQL may not actually apply the same way when you're talking about DocumentDB or DynamoDB or, any other data source that is available as part of the adapters. Like that interpretation of what it means, what the where clause will do and what the select will do and in what order it'll execute those things, you will not know about it till you actually see the query plan.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I guess this all goes back to Don Knuth and saying premature optimization is the root of all evil, right? Just because I have this mental model and I might write my queries a certain way, and I might learn that I'm optimizing towards a constraint that stopped being binding a long time ago.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. And, the SQL query engine is also going to have optimizations in there where if it knows enough about the schema, it could actually make a bunch of decisions. We don't even know what decisions it makes. Like if you look at the Redshift query planner, there are a ton of optimizations and stuff that it does under the hood to make sure that it can partition those queries across different data sets effectively. It pulls in all the data from all the different computes, aggregates it and brings it back to you. That, you wouldn't even know about if you did not know that there was a query plan like that under the hood.
So really not try to prematurely optimize or kind of outsmart the query planner, almost write it naively and then see where's the slow point.
That's one way to do it. Keep it simple, do it fast, get more data into it, start analyzing the results, look at anomalies, fix them.
Perfect. Well, I definitely will be looking at this this API, the Query Statistics API. Well, it looks like we are just about out of time. I think this is a really fun session.
Absolutely.
Oh, do we say we give this a simplifies?
I think so. I think instead of guessing at your query plans or what Athena is going to do, the fact that you now have the query plans and the stats makes life a lot simpler in terms of how you organize your queries. So yes, definitely a simplifies.
Wow. Well, that was 5 simplifies out of 6 and only 1 too complicated for the and that even too complicated had an asterisk and that it's not quite what we wanted, or there could be more data about the AMI.
Correct.
It's pretty good. 5 out of 6. That was nice work, Amazon, this week.
Absolutely. Look forward to next week. And I know that there was a barrage of announcement that just happened very, very shortly before this particular live stream. We've not been able to analyze it and go through it, but we're going to do that next week.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you next week. And thanks again. And thanks, Rahul. We will see you, everyone. See you next week.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon. Bye.
Is your AWS public cloud bill growing? While most solutions focus on visibility, Cloudfix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by finding and implementing AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe. There's zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. We've helped organizations save millions of dollars across tens of thousands of AWS instances. Interested in seeing how much money you can save? Visit cloudfix